Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, neighbors, comrades, all citizens of the world, wherever you're going, wherever you've been, and wherever you're at, we welcome you to the Live from the Heartland show here on YouTube. New episodes air every Friday at 9 a.m. Central Time with individual interviews posted throughout the following week. I'm your host, Michael James, encouraging you to take the chain from the brain, to get back in the people's game, because it's time to move from the lower level to the higher, from the shallower to the deeper, from the one-sided to the many, and from the abstract to the concrete. So without further ado, let's get it on. Hello, all you sisters and brothers, all you citizens of the world. It's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James, your host today, and I'm here in Chicago up in the 49th Ward, thankfully still very blue, and working on our resistance to what's going on in the world. There's a lot of turmoil, as I'm sure all of our listeners and viewers know, and we're not happy about that situation, but it seems like we've come back to life, and there's a lot of resistance. We've got Bernie Sanders traveling around. He's going to the McDowell County in West Virginia, and it's the poorest county in the country, and he's holding a meeting. We have Senator Murphy from Connecticut speaking up. We have people holding meetings, going to demonstrations, making phone calls. Today, it's just before Mardi Gras. And we are recording a couple of days before the show goes live or up on the air and the stream and the TV, etc. I invited Don Paul, friend I met through Athletes United for Peace. He was a competitive runner, longtime activist, been living in New Orleans for a number of years, and he produces records and has a new record out. And Fat Tuesday, the final day of Mardi Gras, of which I have many fond memories, it's on this Tuesday. So I thought it'd be appropriate to have someone from New Orleans come on. The second half of the show will be the head of the board at Indivisible, Kathy Tholin, and she's going to fill us in on the great work that Indivisible is doing here in Chicago and beyond. So with all that said, we're going to take a musical break, hear a little bit of Don Paul and his band, Rivers Answer Moons. And we're going to be right back after we hear a little bit of his tunes. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial, or however you're getting this version, this edition of the Live from the Heartland show.
Freedom. Freedom here. Freedom here be like nowhere. Freedom here be like nowhere else. Louisiana days, Louisiana nights, rivers of dreams.
Okay, welcome back, all you citizens of the world. It's time for the first segment of Live from the Heartland show for the week of February 28th in the year 2025. And our next guest is the person you just heard playing a little bit of music. He's Don Paul with the band Rivers Answer Moons. And I first learned about Don Paul through my good friend Dave Megacy. Many of you have seen him on this show or know about him. He was a pro football player, president of Athletes United for Peace, worked with the union, still working away, trying to make the world a better place. And I heard about this guy, Don Paul, who I think was a hotshot, distance runner. I eventually met him at Basketball in the Barrio in El Paso, Texas. And I've learned a lot more about him. He not only was a hotshot runner, but he's been an activist, a producer of music, and a musician himself with a new album out. So with all that said, how you doing there, Don?
We're doing great. It's a sunny day in New Orleans, about 70 degrees here.
Yeah, well, we're in Chicago and it's warmer than it's been, but it's gray and overcast.
Uh,
Um, uh, I have a soft spot in my heart for New Orleans. Been there a number of times, but most memorable was when Katie Hogan, my business partner in the Heartland Cafe and a producer of this show, we went down and we were in a southern oak tree in Audubon Park by the cat cage up in a pouring rain on Fat Tuesday, and we shook hands and agreed to start the Heartland Cafe.
Holy Tuesday. Yeah.
So we had, I love it, and I hope to come back. And I want to say hello to any of the people I know down there. Some of you know Ben Sandmel, Charles Cannon, Mark
The writer and drummer. Yeah.
and the late great John Sinclair was there for a while. And I know your wife works at what is it, WOZ?
WWOZ. Yeah.
WWOZ. I like that.
Director of Community Engagement. Right. Maurice Philippe Desjans. Yeah.
Well, Don, tell us a little bit about your athletic history, and we'll use that for today's sports report.
Okay, I did an interview 2 days ago with a kind of colleague of yours, Trudy Leong, over at WLUW, and we talked about unions. She asked if I'd ever been in a union, and I said, yeah, the International Woodworkers of the World when I was logging in Southeast Alaska. And then we started union, Association of Road Racing Athletes in 1981, which was the spearhead for prize money in road running and in track and field. We got ourselves banned by convincing road races to award open prize money, and that led to lots of road races across the United States, such as the Chicago Marathon, having really significant prize money, and track and field in Europe, the Grand Prix Series, and so forth. So I'm very proud of that beginning, the Association of Road Racing Athletes, ARA. As an athlete, I qualified for the U.S. Olympic trial in the marathon in 1980 and 1988. I held the world road best for running 50 kilometers between 1982 and 1992. And I was very lucky in that I could continue as a master and a senior and compete at a more or less team level, but we won a couple of national championships and so forth. So I had a 26-year career, if you will, as a distance runner.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, besides being a distance runner, you also became an activist. And, when the world and the state it's in, and it's been in rough shape before and come through it, we hope that'll happen again. But we'd like to encourage younger people to learn a little bit from older activists. So, Don Paul, down in New Orleans, how about sharing a little bit of your activist history? Besides starting a union for distance road racers, what else you've been active in?
Yeah, a group of us started that union. About year 2000, as I turned 50, I really felt a calling to be more involved in the world. So I was in San Francisco then. We founded an entity called Housing is a Human Right for public housing residents. And that kind of landed me in Bayview Hunters Point and in the Black communities there for the next 5 years. Then the Katrina disaster, the federal flood, and the neglect afterward, I moved to New Orleans in 2006 and joined Common Ground. Common Ground was kind of an exemplar, I think, for what people on the ground can do. We had 10,000 volunteers that first year, gutted over 1,200 houses, and kind of stood in opposition to the bulldozing, the literal bulldozing of Black neighborhoods in the upper and lower Ninth Wards. So Common Ground, I think, stands as an example of what people can do as their own government. Yeah.
Give us a little bit of the situation today. I mean, post-Katrina, and most recently we had a number of people killed and injured in this terrorist attack when the guy drove down the street and hit a bunch of people. All that's going on, and you're getting ready for big playoff championships in football, getting ready for Mardi Gras. How are people in New Orleans doing? How have they weather those kind of attacks on their well-being?
Well, as the song goes, they roll with it, or we roll with it. A lot has been visited upon people of color in particular in New Orleans. So they maintain their spirit. We maintain our spirit. The culture is strong. Every Sunday, there's a second line. The social aid and pleasure clubs are just as strong as ever. And there is, talking about young people, there's a huge influx of young people. I noticed at the Broad Theater last night when we saw a soundtrack for a coup d'etat again. Most of the audience was under 30, learning about what had happened in 1960. So what David Amram thinks, and what I think too, is that the knowledge that is now at hand for the younger generation, combined with the experience of those of us who are, gray, can really accomplish a lot. Because I sense, kind of like 1959, the younger generation is on the cusp of wanting to do something profound. And I think that combination of experience and expertise in what can happen in the digital world can be very transformational.
For the people who haven't been to New Orleans, give us a little bit about Mardi Gras and where it comes from and what goes on. I mean, I have really fond memories. I mentioned starting the Heartland, but down in New Orleans, I saw Irma Thomas, and I've seen the Meters, lots of music, lots of riding on that old streetcar. And I remember some donut company came out and they had a place down there. So I had some really good times there. And during Mardi Gras, running through the streets with the marching bands in an altered state, it's one of the highlights of my life. But tell people about what goes on.
Well, my favorite part of New Orleans during Mardi Gras are the Black masking Indians and their practices and their coming out on Mardi Gras morning, the fantastically beautiful costumes that are displayed then. We have a particular friend, Big Chief Shaka Zulu, who we always meet on Mardi Gras morning. So that about Mardi Gras. And then to refer back to my band, Roger Lewis and Kirk Joseph were also of the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. And, the others, Don Bappy on banjo and guitar, and Herman LeBeau on drum set, and Alexi Marti on congas and cajon. All these musicians are daily involved or nightly involved in what's happening here. The music comes up to an even higher level than its ordinary level. The clubs are, hopping every night, and there are a lot of people doing what you did when you visited, taking in that culture and getting happy and expanded.
You mentioned that movie, or you going to the movies, and it triggered my memory here. I met the guy Les Blank, who did a movie called Always for Pleasure. Do you remember that movie? You seen it?
Well, we're Les Blank hounds. We love Les Blank. We've actually bought the 5 DVD set, and we've given a couple of those sets out to friends. Yeah, we think he's marvelous. Yeah.
Yeah, I met him in Berkeley, I think, at a restaurant that's a friend of Megacy's owned. Well, one of the things that triggered me inviting you to come on live from the Heartland was you let us know, and more than me, that you had a new album out, a new CD, a double CD called Louisiana Stories.
It's an album and a stage show. It was kind of inspired with the thought that the tracks would progress as if they were happening on a stage. So I'm very, very happy with how this album has turned out. I think it's a great band, Don, Paul, and Rivers Answer Moons. We also have Louis and Andre Michaud from the Lost Bayou Ramblers from Acadiana, and we have other guests, Herlin Riley, Lynn Drury, Erica Falls, Michael Torregano Jr., Mario Abney, who's now living in Chicago and leading a brass band there, among other bands. So I'm delighted with how it all turned out. We recorded part of the album over in Acadiana at Dockside Studios with a great engineer named Justin Tockett. It was number 2 last week across North America among crossover jazz, and was number 2 3 weeks ago, then number 4. It seems to be really well accepted. Lots of people are downloading tracks via my Stanza Human Being site on the Substack platform. So I could not be happier with the actuality of Louisiana Stories.
We hear a good amount of Louisiana music when after this show goes up on WLUW. We're on a number of platforms these days, but one of the shows that follows us is the New Orleans Music Hour with a guy named Tom Jackson.
Jackson. You helped me get to know him just 2 weeks ago. He's a great guy.
Oh, good. That was really where I was going with. Did he ever get back? Did you get in touch with each other?
Sure did. He's a subscriber now to Stanza Human Being on Substack. Yeah. I need to send him like a New Orleans oriented playlist. Yeah.
No, that'd be good. And I'll take any kind of playlist you got too, because I'm listening to music in between doing other things all the time.
Right.
Talk a little bit about you. You not only are making music, but on the broader sense of making music, you also have produced a number of albums and things going on. That I didn't know about.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky when I first got into music through my brother Kenton in '88 in San Francisco, just after you and I met around the time of the AUP visit to Nicaragua. Yeah, that launched me into producing about 16 albums in the next 7 years there. I got heavily engaged with the creative music community and produced albums by Glenn Spearman, Lyle Ellis, India Cook, Paul Plymley, and had a band called The Suspect Many. But as I said to Trudy Lung, 2 days ago, it was like being reborn when I got into the recording studio. There was so many possibilities, and there are a lot more possibilities now with the technology available. You mentioned Trudy at the beginning, and she's actually at WZRD.
Mm-hmm. I think her husband has got a show on WLUW. You just mentioned that Nicaragua and Athletes United for Peace. Were you on that trip? My mind fades a little bit, but I went to Nicaragua 3 times. And were you on one of those trips? I went twice. Yeah, first was AUP. Rather, the second, I went first as a writer. I went to a conference of writers and performers in '87, independent of AUP. And then in '88, I led an AUP delegation that also ran the Managua to Messiah El Replique run. Yeah, that race. No, so that's a different trip than the one I was on. Yeah, you were on with David and Guy and Shinnick, and I went a number of times. How about let's do a little politics. What's going on in your state? I always go back to Huey Long, who's been billed as a kind of a fascist guy, but I always liked him saying when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in an American flag. And for a state that at one time was Democratic and has produced a lot of interesting people, I think you're in a little bit rougher shape these days. And we did talk about young people and activism, but what's your take on our general situation in the country and how it manifests in Louisiana? Well, I think it's definitely on us, we people, to become our own government. I don't think Democrat, Republican has any credibility at all anymore. The great thing about Louisiana, and it's part of what I try to evoke in the album and that the musicians, carry, is that this is a different state. As somebody, more than one person has said to me, you got to come to New Orleans. It's not like the United States. That's true. There's a whole lot of culture here across the state that kind of sustains itself. And I think, like, I was reading the American Prospect 2 days ago, and they're talking about all the districts where Republican congressmen who won big in November are visiting, and they're being completely rebuked and chastised for what's going on in terms of workers losing jobs, like being
cut off. So I'm thinking that the extremities that are being waged against working people now are going to cause us to more unite and create a future apart from electoral politics.
Well, I agree with that. I do run with the Democrats a bit, and I get called out by some of my kids for that. But I also I'm big on activism in the streets and working it in a lot of ways. Our guest later in the show is from someone from Indivisible, who are out there doing a lot of stuff. What inspires you, both on the musical front and on your activism front?
It's always people, you know. In Louisiana Stories, there are 2 tracks devoted to outstanding people whom I met in the late 70s into the 80s. Jack Groves from Acadiana, a driller in the oil field, and Marcia, real name Marie Cordier, who was my real introduction to New Orleans culture. Actually, you can see a glimpse of Marcia in Les Blanc's movie, Always for Pleasure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, it's always people. And the people here are so wonderful. I'm sure that's true there, too. A section of my book, 9/11 Facing Our Fascist State, has to do with Rogers Park and a reading that you set up, bringing me to the Heartland Cafe and introducing me to that stupendous amount of culture, multicultural there just on the murals of Rogers Park. Yeah.
Well, it is a wonderful place. We're, pretty blue over here, right by the blue water of the Great Lake, Michigan. We got a couple minutes left. So how about you got some plans for more music or things that you want to do, lurking in your brain and your heart that are on the horizon?
Right. I'm headed to California tomorrow morning to spend time with my daughter and her husband and 2 grandsons. And I'm performing on Friday night at an event organized by Matt Gonzalez, the former Green Party supervisor and later candidate for vice president, with Richard Howell, an old musical colleague. And I'll be going to Southern California, and I hope performing there at benefits. But the way I'm framing all the performances is for our neighbors, because so many are hard hit over the past year or so. Altadena, Pacific Palisades, Appalachia, La Habana, so forth. So the performances are under that theme of for our neighbors, and I'm very, very excited to be reuniting with old friends in the Bay Area and in Southern California. That really excites me. The next album from DPRAM, which I think we will call More Love Than Work, that really excites me. I urge everyone to check out those musicians, Don Vappy, Roger Lewis, Kirk Joseph, Alexi Marti, Herman LeBeau. Just put in their names and you'll go to a lot of places on the internet. And we have a lot of tracks up. They're being downloaded. All About Jazz did The Dreamers and the Believers as its song of the day two weeks ago. So all of it's related to the band and possibilities for the public excite me.
Well, Don, we were talking about young people earlier, and I know that when my son Katie put out his first albums with a band called Twin Peaks, they didn't do CDs; they just did records. And I'm wondering if you're old enough or young enough to still do records, or it's just CD.
I would love to put out LPs because I like the LP sound too, above anything else. We did CDs for a couple of reasons. 2 CDs, separate the instrumentals from the track, the disc with vocals, and also to have the booklet. There's a 20-page booklet there, and it was more expensive to do vinyl.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're a wonderful guy, and I wish I still had some clubs. I used to have music going in 3 places, and we'd have your band. But I'm sure that you got a lot of contacts up here, and when you're going to bring the band, I'm going to come, and I'll be in the front row.
Okay, great. Okay.
And I might come down and see you in New Orleans.
Do that. We've got a lot of good food, a lot of good everything here. So
you certainly do. Okay, everybody listening in or viewing, Don Paul is a hell of a guy. Get that album. You'll really enjoy it.
Available at Louisiana Music Factory only. We're sticking no digital platforms, just Louisiana Music Factory. You can buy it online or come to the store, which is a lot of fun in itself.
Okay, brother. We'll see you. And everyone else, stay tuned. We'll be right back with the second segment of Live from the Heartland for the week of February 28th.
Bands are bringing everyone home. Freedom, we live for it. Batons are twirled in the sun and moon. Freedom, feeling this day. Sleek fishing boats shine by rows of cane. Freedom, what we've earned. Hoods cast away through men, sugar and babe. Freedom, we're not stupid. Roads flat as a belt, schools and hospitals for all. Freedom, we made things good. And gonna bump, diddy bump, diddy bump, diddy bump, diddy bump, diddy bump, diddy bump. Two souls of cowboy and with future stars. Freedom, it's what we're about.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, it's back to Live from the Heartland for the second segment of our show for the week of February 28th. And I am really honored to have as our next guest someone from Indivisible, actually the board chair of Indivisible, Kathy Tholin. And I went to my first Indivisible demonstration a week or two back over at the Federal Building, and was pretty impressed with the various vibe of the place, the number of people, a lot of senior types from earlier organizations, plenty of young people. It was pretty wonderful, and I thought it would be time to bring Indivisible on. I do have a close friend, Wendy Kramer-Posner, who Kathy knows, and she was the first person I knew who was active in Indivisible and is a longtime old friend. So I went to the website and I saw the Indivisible is all about remaking our democracy. Indivisible is a movement of thousands of group leaders, millions of members, taking the initiative, increasingly complex actions to resist the GOP's agenda, electing local champions, and fighting for progressive policy. So that's right up my alley. It's right up the Live from the Heartland alley. And with all that said, hello to you, Kathy. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were with the Center for Neighborhood Technology. I'm sure you've been involved with lots of other things. Your name is very familiar. Katie Hogan, our producer, talks very highly of you. Fill us in about yourself a bit.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I spent my working career in nonprofit community development work in Chicago in a number of different places. Have always had a commitment to this place, Chicago. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, as an adult at least, and have always been working in issues and ways that address inequities in our city, that create development opportunities that benefit low and moderate income people and communities, that are environmentally beneficial, and in fact, the intersection of those things. I have been out of the work world for a little while, and have been in recent years engaged in a different kind of actions, starting, I guess, in about 2017 after the presidential election, when it became clear that a different kind of work was necessary. And so I've been involved with a number of folks, but largely with Indivisible Chicago in both resisting, as you were speaking of, resisting the things that the ways that the Trump agenda was working to destroy our freedom and our well-being and our security, and also working hard to elect other other elected officials who would carry on a progressive agenda. We could, and I'd love to talk a bit about that while we're talking today, those electoral issues. And then, so I have during the last 4 years been very involved in those elections. Now, obviously, very involved in with Indivisible Chicago on as we work to resist even greater threats than we have had in the past.
Well, we'll go to those elections in a minute. I'm going to ask one more thing. I'm just a curious kind of guy when it comes to progressive organizations. And how did Indivisible come into existence here in Chicago? Who are the people maybe who are involved, and how did you get involved with it?
Sure. And I wasn't there on day one,
That's what I was after.
but I came in a little later, but pretty much as soon as after the presidential election in 2016, Indivisible itself nationally was launched because a group of folks who used to work in congressional offices wrote a paper about how to resist this agenda and what lessons we might take from the ways that the right had organized to punch above its weight during other previous times. And that paper took off like wildfire, and people all around the country started organizing little groups of people. Here in Chicago, several folks led by Jason Rieger, who was we credit as being the founder of Indivisible Chicago, decided to hold a meeting to see if anyone would show up to talk about organizing. Thought they'd get, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people, and hundreds of people walked in the door. Clearly, there was a huge interest and appetite for figuring out what to do next and resisting what was going on. Out of that, Indivisible Chicago was born. And today, just to say a little more about that, today there are the long name is the Indivisible Chicago Alliance, which is made up of both individual members from across Chicago and surrounding suburbs, but also individual neighborhood chapters, community chapters, both in Chicago and in suburban areas. So we have there are chapters of Indivisible that do work that gather in communities locally, in Evanston, in downtown Chicago, in Lincoln Square, in Lakeview, on the Northwest Side, and various other locations around Chicago.
Well, I get a daily email telling me what's going on and who I should call and where there's a demonstration. You mentioned this initial paper when Indivisible was founded, and it just triggered this thing, and maybe you're already starting it, but would that be comparable to the Republicans' evil paper to 25 or whatever it's called? I'm wondering if we really have a plan for when we take power again, for what kind of things we might initiate.
It wasn't that kind of paper. We need the blueprint, right? There are pieces of that blueprint around, but that's not how, we don't have the Project 20, whatever it's going to be, year in quite the same way as they did. But and this was a blueprint for resistance.
All right.
That was done in 2017, because that's what was called for at that moment.
I get it. And I think part of the resistance is electoral politics and electing real good politicians or leaders or whatever we want to call them, representatives. Fill us in on the work that you do and that Indivisible does on that front.
Sure. So here's the first thing to know. Here in Chicago, we enjoy an advantage that almost no progressive folks have anywhere in the country, which is we are within driving distance of two absolutely critical swing states.
Right.
So Indivisible, since the run up to the 2018 elections and going forth from there, has dedicated itself to organizing, sometimes in Illinois when there are critical, and there are some critical elections that happen here, and we've been involved in them. But largely organizing people to both go to canvas in and call into our neighboring states of Wisconsin and Michigan. And that work has grown. It's always been pretty substantial, and it has grown with each election. And I would say in this last round, I mean, we had easily upwards of 1,500 individual people who got involved in the Wisconsin and Michigan elections. Some of them were out knocking on doors every Saturday. Some of them were out knocking on doors every Saturday and Sunday. Some of them were coming, when they could. But we had, even though the presidential race in both those states was not won, there were some really important victories that are key to holding on to some power that we really need. So.
Well, we had an election up there in Wisconsin for a Supreme Court justice, and we the voters shifted the composition of the Supreme Court in Wisconsin to positive, progressive, and that is before us again. There's another Supreme Court seat that's coming up. There's an election. It will determine a lot of decisions made in that state. You want to fill us in on that particular election? Because I know back during the last election, we were up there for Operation, I wasn't, but many people I know were up there for Operation Swing State. And I love the concept. I think it'll get refined. How do you interpret what people tell you or don't tell you? But tell us a little bit about this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin and why it's so crucial.
Right. So this goes on the list of everybody who's out there saying, like, what can I do? What can I do right now? This goes should go close to the top of everybody's list. As you said, Michael, we won an election for a Supreme Court that was absolutely critical, not just to Wisconsin, but to the country as a whole. When we got the 4-3 majority, the Wisconsin Supreme Court reversed the gerrymandered maps that were keeping Wisconsin, way outsized Republican legislature for the population overall. Some strides were made in this last election to get more Democratic representation in the legislature, and they're on track because not everyone's elected every 2 years, right? They're on track to make even more strides next time and possibly recapture the legislature or portions of the legislature. So the gerrymandered maps, we didn't have, we weren't at risk of challenging election results. There were all kinds of things that the Wisconsin Supreme Court was now protecting against abuses of power and anti-democratic, with a small d, actions, right? So we're now in a place where another judge is retiring, leaving an open seat. There are two candidates. The progressive candidate, Susan Crawford, is a Judge Susan Crawford. And her opponent was the Attorney General under Scott Walker. Remember Scott Walker?
Oh yeah,
he's the guy who shut everything down in Wisconsin, and he's being bankrolled by. Yes.
I would imagine it's some kind of I don't like to say his name, but the musky guy.
No. Yeah, that guy. He's being bankrolled by that guy. And it's a absolutely crucial election. We lose it and we go back to the 3-4. We win it. We maintain the 4-3. And this is going to be important for all elections nationally going forward, right? And is one of the first opportunities to demonstrate people aren't going with the Musk agenda, right? The Musk-Trump agenda. This is the first opportunities for a loss of the current regime. So it's absolutely critical. And I just want to say, Janet Protasewicz, she beat her opponent by, I wish I could quote it.
Good amount.
Way more than any of the other elections, like these close elections. It was the least close election in Wisconsin, something like this, for a very long time. And the reason is that this is an April 1st election, right? Not so many people vote. So this is an eminently winnable election, but it is not winnable unless people are made aware of the election and the stakes. So this is one of those where the job is to go out and tell people, because people are like, most people don't pay close attention to the election calendar like this. And Wisconsin has so many elections. They're just always having elections. So making people aware. So this is actually, I'm just going to finish my little pitch because, going to Wisconsin and knocking on some doors or being on the phone banks, which we're running every Wednesday night. We have one tonight and every Wednesday, Wisconsin Wednesdays. We're calling and talking to Democrats who need to get out to vote, and we get them to come vote, and we will win. We get people to understand that Elon Musk is bankrolling the opposition, and they understand how important it is. So, and the really important thing is that these judge elections are nonpartisan. So there is no D or R next to these candidates' names. You have to know which one is which. And so it's an educational opportunity. And so it's a great thing to do. And if you want to sign up, go to indivisiblechicago.com and find our list. We're every weekend, we're every Saturday in Wisconsin. I know also the Operation Swing State folk, our colleagues in this effort in the Chicago area are also sending people up over these next weekends. So it's a great opportunity, and you want to feel good about doing something, and you want to put your stake in the ground against Elon Musk, come to Wisconsin with us or get on a phone bank. There is a progressive candidate and a regressive candidate, and we've got to elect the progressive.
No, I'm sympathetic to that side of things. And so right now, if people, what you're doing in Wisconsin is knocking on doors, and there are phone banks. And are there any other, you talked about Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois can play an impact on both of those states in elections. I'm wondering a little bit about our other neighbors. Iowa, I don't know, is there any hope for things changing in Iowa? Is there any hope for Andy Beshear in Kentucky spreading his vibe throughout the rest of people there? And what about Missouri, which used to have some Democrats in office? I don't know where it's all at now. Those are all states I used to really like, but I'm not as happy with them these days. Is there any visible activity there?
I'm not going to tell you there is no hope for anywhere, I will say that who can predict the future? And there's a lot of entrenched opinion. However, you just named a whole bunch of farm states, and farmers are reeling from what's going on right now. They are in big trouble. They are in big trouble because they won't be able to sell their crops through USAID to other countries. They are in big trouble because a whole bunch of grants and monies that they had counted upon have been frozen. We're seeing warnings that, farms are going to go out of business. And none of those folks signed up for this, right? So I can't tell you what kind of organizing is going on in those states specifically, because I don't know. But there's an enormous opportunity to at least, mobilize some folks to fight back who are going to be, dramatically affected. And we haven't even started talking about Medicaid cuts and the people who are dependent on that for their kids, for the, for nursing home residents, et cetera.
Well, how far do you think the Trump administration will go on all these issues? Maybe take a few of them and talk about what they mean and how people might interpret them, and there might be some resistance to them. I mean, we've got
Right.
not only U.S. aid, we've got a lot of places and a lot of issues we have to deal with these days.
It's a fire hose of issues, and so I'm not going to pretend to be the policy expert on all of them. I'm gonna take a narrower view, which is they are bent on dismantling everything, and they are bent on dismantling everything in order to give control to unelected billionaires and oligarchs. And of course, as we know, not just control, but they don't want them to have to pay for anything. So, they want to give tax breaks. So they, there's a lot of different theys going on here, right? There's the people behind Project 2025. There's Elon Musk and Donald Trump. There's the MAGA folks in Congress. They have their different priorities, but at the top, they don't care about any of these things, right? They want to dismantle government in order to dismantle government. And so
probably into privatize too.
And to privatize, that's part of the giving control to the, to the moneyed, and the corporations and the billionaires. As someone, as one of the people I listen to, Anat Shankar-Osorio, said the other day, it is government of the bullies for the billionaires. And so how far they will go, the answer is they will go as far as they can, right? Because they don't particularly have any limits on this. So the only limits are going to be the ones that they are forced to accept. It's my short answer. I think it cuts across the board on all of them, right?
You talked earlier about we and how we have to do it, and I'm wondering how we do that, and what your sense is around hope from within members of Congress and the Senate, like Chris Murphy and Bernie Sanders. So we have to work on a lot of fronts. But your thoughts on those people, and even Hakeem Jeffries and the we of Indivisible?
Yeah, so we do have to work on a lot of fronts, right? And there's, just to back up just a touch, there's three fronts going on right now. There's the court front, right? That's the one that's going to have to go on its own without most of us. The lawyers are extremely busy. They're not getting much sleep. That's one. The second is our elected officials, and the third is us. Us being the people. Right? Everybody affected by all of these. And the second two are interrelated, but they are also distinct. And so, yes, we absolutely need our elected officials to be fighting back with every possible tool they have. And they have some tools. They don't have all the tools we want, and we're going to have to keep pushing them to use those tools, because our elected officials, just to be honest, they never have been and aren't elected because they are rabble rousers or they are organizers. So the organizers out here, all of us, have to help them understand what we need and what we want and what we expect them to do, and also to tell them when they do it, we have their back. So yeah, people like Bernie Sanders and oh my gosh, Chris Murphy, a little brain freeze there. Chris Murphy
from my home state of Connecticut.
They're doing a bang up job. They're doing great. Then others too. We've got some Illinois representatives who are really doing amazing work. My own Congresswoman Delia Ramirez is one of those stand-up people. We have to push them, and we have to tell them we have their backs, right? But they also, I know we're probably going to run out of time, so I want to say this, that we all need to understand that it's also up to us to demonstrate on an ongoing basis to our elected representatives, but also to everybody else that this resistance is real. I am wearing this button because not just to advertise Indivisible Chicago, indivisiblechicago.com, but because I've been wearing this on my coat for the last couple of weeks since that rally in Federal Plaza, and I go to the grocery store, I go everywhere. People stop and talk to me. They say, "Oh my gosh, this is so terrible. What can I do?" And I tell them things that I can do. But, what will stop this and what will get people who aren't engaged is seeing that there are people engaged who are willing to fight. If they don't see that, then people don't have the courage or the energy to get involved. So yes, we need to push our elected officials, but we have to find ways to demonstrate here in Chicago, in the red states, but also, in the blue states, but also in the red states, that people are resisting what's going on. And that's what's going to get our elected officials moving as well. So I'm advocating for as much direct action as possible. If you want to find out what we're doing here in Chicago, that daily action that you get, you can sign up for that and get on our mailing list. We don't bug you too much, but we let you know what's going on.
Any sense of if the courts rule in favor of some things on the left side of the agenda, do you think that Trump is going to follow that, or are we going to see a breakdown of response to the law?
We don't know, right?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. I think, I hope we get to find out because we need the courts to stand up, right? So I hope we get to find out. And if they don't, I think that tells us something about what we have to do to organize to make our voices heard.
Thanks so much for coming on live from the Heartland, and I hope we have you back because there's a lot going on and we're going to share as much as we can. I want to take this opportunity to in memoriam, not only Roberta Flack, but Barbara Snap, who was active in music here in Chicago, worked at the Heartland Cafe. I want to thank the people who make this show possible. My son, Hal James, our engineer. I want to thank Katie Hogan and Tom Clark and Lynn Orman, our producers, and certainly our guests today, Kathy Tholin and Don Paul. Together, we can make a big difference. All power to the people, do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that we do. See you next week. Over and out. We want to thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m., in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21, or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM, or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform, and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
To limb. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing